Asian steppes didn't see a grey wolf like him. He was a son of an ordinary family. He established a glorious empire, occupying lands from China to Mediterranean shores, and from India to Moscow. He called himself the leader who determines the fate of stars. He is acknowledged as one of the 3 biggest military geniuses. When his 35 years of adventure ended, he would be leaving 17 million dead bodies behind. Emir Timur, Tamerlane. Think of a life which doesn't have a day without adventure. That's a life like his. He was born in 1336 in a village which belongs to the Barlas tribe. He was the son of Turgay and Tekina Hatun. He fled from his tribe when the Khan of Chagatai ordered his execution. He wandered around the desert and became bandits and mercenaries and done thievery with his wife Aliya Turkana and his best friend Emir Hüseyin. They were even captured and sentenced to imprisonment in a barn full of bugs. After these events, he sustained injuries from his leg and arm, and he gained the nickname Tamerlane, Limping Timur. After his recovery, Timur and Hüseyin came back to Transoxiana. In that period, he used his own battle tactics in order to seize control over Transoxiana and to make a name for himself. In one of these battles, he deceived his enemies to think they have been surrounded by Timur's army from all sides by lighting campfires on hilltops surrounding the enemy. He equipped his soldiers with long wooden sticks to raise dust while they were chasing the fleeing enemy. His enemies thought that a huge army was after them thanks to this tactic. With this tactic, he occupied a number of important cities, but he couldn't announce himself as Khan, because only a person who is a descendant of Genghis Khan could be a Khan, according to the laws of Genghis. This caused him to use the title Emir, and he dragged along a puppet Khan who is a descendant of Genghis. This was only a formality. This is how his inconceivable conquests began. The secret of Emir Timur being so successful is being a good leader in addition to being cunning and making politics. He founded a very sophisticated spy network. He was able to map the country he wants to conquer and stir up the internal problems of the country. Spreading fear was one of his greatest weapons. So many cities had surrendered without Timur even attacking. How so? For instance, in India campaign, he took the head of 100,000 civilians. When Timur occupied Delhi, which is the capital of India, they have an army that consisted of 125 elephants. While trying to find a solution for elephants, he found an interesting but terrifying idea. He tied hundreds of camels to each other. He burned them all and then surrounded the elephants with the burning bodies. Frightened animals went back and crushed the Indian soldiers. Timur made a tower from the head of the civilians who revolted against him. At the same time, he spread Islam in India with the Indian expeditions. By expelling Christians from the territory, he prohibited the spread of Christianity. He had an interesting passion for hats. For example, in Isfahan, which is one of the most important places in Islamic geography, even though the people had surrendered, when Timur's soldiers began to rape women, the people lynched Timur's 3,000 men. After that, Timur took the head of hundreds of thousands of Isfahan people, and thousands of them were put in the mortars and became material for buildings. He constructed buildings out of people. In Aleppo, which is now in Syrian border, when people resisted against him, he made tables for himself and made it compulsory for soldiers to come back with at least 2 hats. Even the soldiers who could not do this to the Muslims like themselves tried to buy hats from the other soldiers so as to register their names. Those hats were lined up in the visible part of the city like a tower. Ibn Tagribirdi asserted that in Baghdad, Timur also commanded his soldiers to bring him hats, and then he made 120 towers from the 100,000 hats which the soldiers brought him. And in the city, the blood was flowing like a river. He ordered his soldiers to demolish the grave of Yazid. who is known as the killer of the Prophet Muhammad's grandsons Hassan and Hussein. Then he called out for 1,000 of his men and turned the grave into a urine pool. Despite everything, he was not a barbarian or disruptive. Timur was a man who wants to build, not to demolish. He committed all his massacres according to the Genghis laws. Emir Timur's aim was not establishing an empire, it was the conquest of the whole world. And he was actually gifted with rare talents to achieve it. Edgar Allan Poe mentioned him in one of his poems as a king who regrets to be human. Timur himself was calling himself a Sahib Kran, which means the leader who determines the fate of the stars. Since there is a god in the sky, there had to be an emperor on the ground. He said that the earth is so small and is not able to answer one's desires. One of Timur's most important campaigns was an Anatolian campaign. During then, Yildirim Bayezid was the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. He was a self-confident ruler. When it comes to Timur, he wanted to conquer the Ottoman Empire, which might turn into a threat for him in the west before the China campaign. As can be understood by the letters that I'm going to read now, he was not aiming to fight with the Ottomans. Instead, he wanted to make peace. However, it was Yildirim Bayezid who pushed for the war. Yildirim Bayezid, who became the ruler of the Rumland, should know that we are the rulers that made the largest part of the human world our empire with our might and power. We did this unprecedented job on our own. I did not inherit countries from our father like you. Get yourself together and exile Kara Yusuf and Ahmet Celayir from your land. You must have heard about the fate of those who are opposed to our orders. Avoid from getting among those rulers. Old dog, you are a worse infidel than the Byzantines. You wanted to scare us and deceive us with your tricks. Are you supposing that I am a person who is like Ajam rulers, or my soldiers are idle like Kipchak Tatars, or stray as Indians? Our soldiers are too honorable to be devastated. Don't compare them with Aleppo soldiers. You assume that you are doing jihad on Allah's way, and that we are infidels who spills blood in an unfair way, and you thought I was a newbie warrior. Know that I have devoted my soul for jihad for nearly 40 years. Why are you avoiding from serving us, not showing love? I am also older than you. Don't give rein to threats and pride in your letter. Don't dare say words far from logic. If I get a letter which contains your sincere greetings and good words, both sides would become soft and start to love each other. Otherwise, if swords are drawn, words will be futile. Bayezid's answer in summary was including sentences like, if you are not going to show up on battlefield, divorce your wife. And there was no coming back. You can read them from the video's explanation section. These words were overwhelming for Timur, since he just lost her wife. When he read the answer, he jumped off from where he was sitting and ordered for the launch of the campaign of Anatolia. He knew Anatolian geography better than Bayezid, because he had mapped every stream, every creek, and every passage. Bayezid chased after Timur. However, Timur was always 3 steps ahead of him. He captured all the water sources and plundered Anatolia. He was going to make an example out of what he did in Sivas. There were 4,000 Armenian archers among the soldiers who defended the Sivas castle. These soldiers had done great damage to Timur's troops. Timur had promised not to shed blood, and Sivas surrendered. Indeed, he kept his word and did not shed blood. He buried the 4,000 Armenian archers alive. Genghis also made an action like this long time ago. In the letters, Bayezid reproached Timur due to those massacres in Sivas. Timur came to Izmir and described the city as the most beautiful one in the world. In fact, for 7 years, Izmir was tried to be captured by the Hospitalier Knights, but they couldn't take it. However, Timur took Izmir in just 15 days and gifted it to the Turkish world. He had thousands of knights beheaded and threw them to the tower. With cannons, he threw not cannonballs but hats to Christian warships. Timur wasn't just fighting, he was also a master at breeding bad blood among princes of Ottomans, old lordships, and enemy nations around them. Even some princes agreed on joining to Timur voluntarily. Some others, on the other hand, died away. Even Yıldırım Bayezid said, "Sing, shepherd, sing, as if your son died like Ertuğrul's, as if your castle ruined like Sivas, because of these events." The date was 1402. Two armies faced against each other in Ankara, Çubuk Plain. Even if the writings written by Timur's order says that the Ottoman army's manpower was 70,000, historians think that this number should be between 40 and 50,000 Ottoman infantry. Timur's army mostly consisted of cavalries, which are especially Kara Tatars, Kipchak Turks, Mongolian horse archers and Turkmen cavalries, and about 15 elephants came from India. Two huge Turkic armies, two names of the known world, have come against each other. The Ottoman army, which is tired of being chased by Timur across Anatolia, was crushed by Timur in a very short notice. During the battle, so many Ottoman soldiers switched sides and joined Timur's forces. Only Janissaries and Serbian and Rumelian allies stayed loyal and fought on Bayezid's side till the end. In the end, 16 kilometers away from the battlefield, Bayezid ended up being captured by Timur. Timur treated him not like a captive but like a ruler. Some sources state that he was carried around in cages. This was not a cage but a palanquin, which was used by the rulers, but still having iron bars around it. After a little while, Bayezid died. Some sources claim that he committed suicide by drinking poison. Some claim his reason of death was something else. The name of the commander of the Elephant Division in Timur's army was named Isil Puka. His name evolved in time and became Esenboğa in present day, and it was given to the airport, which is located in Ankara. After this war, the Ottomans ended up in an era of interregnum, which is full of internal troubles for 11 years. The era of interregnum lasted until Mehmet Çelebi established unity. These events set back Ottomans from turning an empire from a nation and the conquest of Istanbul for 50 years. The fear of Timur scattered around the Europe because the Ottoman Empire, which was the buffer zone in between, was defeated, and there were no obstacles for Timur to march on Europe. However, he had no such intention because he wanted to move towards China, since he considered Europe as poor. Timur is also the name that laid the foundation of today's Russia. When he was in Caucasus campaign, the Khan of the Golden Horde, descended from Genghis, took the opportunity, entered the country and even approached Samarkand. Thereupon, Timur chased after Toktamish and caught him in Siberian steppes. In this great battle, 100,000 people died either by freezing or by swords. As a result of this event, the Golden Horde was weakened, and Russians started to take the control gradually. Even though he was a Muslim, this belief has an important difference with today's perception, because Timur was bound up with Turkish-Mongolian traditions and Genghis laws. He described Genghis as the Khan of Khans, while describing himself and seeing himself as the groom of the Khan of Khans. According to the old shaman traditions, before the war he would benefit from fortune-telling through the organs of animals. In Asia, he abolished Arabian alphabet and put Uyghur alphabet in use, having lots of books written in it. Even one of them is named Tüzükat-ı Timur. You can read an important part of his life from this book. Timur is the ruler that made the shape of today's Asia. You can see him as a barbarian. However, this definition does not fully reflect it because he was incredibly fond of art and science. He invited all of the artists and scientists from all countries he conquered to Samarkand. He even brought them by force. He is the grandfather of the famous philosopher Ulubey. He rebuilt the big cities of today's Uzbekistan. He built some of the largest squares and palaces in the world. Still, the square of Emir Timur is one of the most popular tourist destinations. Today, he is considered as the greatest historical ancestor of Uzbekistan Turks, and they are not wrong about this. It's not possible to become a fan of him after seeing Samarkand. Even when he conquered Iran, he went to the grave of Firdevsi, who once humiliated him. Setting his foot on the grave, Timur said, "Rise, Firdevsi. Get up and see the Turk you insulted. Rise and see whether Isfahan or Samarkand is more beautiful. I didn't leave any Persian from Baghdad to where you lie. The grass started not to grow from my lame footsteps." The year was 1405. While Timur was on his way to Chinese expedition, he became ill and died on the steppe at a cold night. When he died, he already established a great empire, which stretched from Egypt to China. He is accepted as the greatest military genius after Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great. The whole world knows him with either respect or hatred. However, what he did was a product of superhuman will. This is the story of Timur, who came from nothing. Story of the most ruthless wolf of the steppes. The founder of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, admired Timur so much that he has so many words about him. He examined all of his war tactics and found them all perfect. He even said that, "If I had lived in Timur's time, I couldn't have done what he did. But if he were today, he could have done so much more." Great people become great by meeting great people and remunerate them. It's a low probability for a man like Genghis or Timur to ever come to the Middle Asia again. It was the most crowded and wealthy region of this continent once. The struggle to seize the control of this region set forth to these men. But today, it's far from being the world's center. When Timur died, he left 17 million dead bodies behind his 35 years of conquest adventures. But he passed away from this world as one of the greatest Turkic rulers. He is gone, but his legacy will never be forgotten. Emir Timur, Tamerlane, the ruler who set the fate of the stars. By the way, I'd like to thank Ozoda Nursaidova, one of the most famous Uzbek artists, for her contributions to the Turkic world on behalf of Turks.